Live with resilience, and discover true peace of mind. Lesson 1: Control what you can. Accept what you cannot. Life constantly tests us with situations beyond our grasp. From the weather outside our window to the words spoken behind our back. From sudden illness to the unpredictable turns of fortune. Much of what happens in the world lies completely outside our control. And yet, so often, we respond to these uncontrollable forces with anger, frustration, or despair. The Stoics saw this pattern clearly and offered one of their most timeless lessons. Peace of mind begins with drawing a line between what belongs to us and what does not. Epictetus, once a slave and later a great Stoic teacher, opened his Enchiridion with the very first principle: some things are up to us, and some are not. This distinction may seem simple, but it is the very foundation of Stoic philosophy. To ignore it is to live in constant turmoil. To accept it is to unlock inner freedom. Within our control are our judgments, our intentions, our choices, and our actions. Outside of our control are external events, the behavior of other people, the natural unfolding of the universe, the passing of time, the inevitability of death. The Stoic path begins by seeing this truth clearly. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Here lies the Stoic secret. Strength is not the power to bend the world to our desires, but the ability to master our response to the world as it is. The world will not always follow the script we imagine. Friends will disappoint us. Storms will cancel our plans. Strangers will misunderstand us. But our mind, if disciplined, remains our fortress. Think of a sailor on the sea. He cannot control the wind, the waves, or the storms that rise without warning, but he can control the set of his sails, the grip on the wheel, and his own courage to face the tempest. A foolish sailor curses the storm and demands that the sea obey him. A wise sailor adjusts and navigates, accepting the limits of his power while exercising mastery where it counts. In the same way, the Stoic accepts that life brings storms yet remembers he still holds the rudder of his soul. In modern life, we see countless examples of wasted energy when people try to fight what they cannot change. Consider the worker who spends endless nights resenting his company for policies beyond his influence. Instead of focusing on his own skill, his growth, or his decision to stay or leave. Or think of the parent who tries to control every aspect of their child's future, dictating their career, their friends, even their passions, only to discover that control slips away as the child becomes an adult. In both cases, suffering grows because energy is directed at what lies outside one's sphere of power. Now imagine a different path. Imagine that same worker shifting his focus toward what he can control, improving his craft, treating colleagues with respect, saving money to one day start anew. Instead of bitterness, he finds dignity in action. Or imagine the parent who, instead of grasping at control, offers guidance, love, and example, while allowing the child the freedom to grow. Instead of disappointment, the parent discovers peace. This is the Stoic way. Conserve energy for what truly belongs to you, and let go of anxiety where it does not. It does not mean passivity or indifference. The Stoic does not shrug and say, "Nothing matters." On the contrary, the Stoic works tirelessly on what can be shaped: character, virtue, habits, choices. When faced with injustice, a Stoic does not waste time wishing the world were fair. Instead, they ask, "What can I do, here and now, to live with justice myself?" When insulted, a Stoic does not demand that others speak kindly. They remind themselves, "It is not in my power to control their tongue, but it is in my power to control my patience." Epictetus once remarked, "When something happens, the only thing in your power is your attitude toward it." This is why the Stoic discipline is not about cold detachment, but about liberating the soul from chains of false control. Anger, after all, is often the voice of frustrated control, the belief that if we shout louder, demand harder, the universe will bend. But the universe does not bend. What bends, instead, is our own mind when we realize what is truly ours. Consider a common frustration: traffic. You leave home on time, only to find yourself stuck in a jam. Red lights stretching as far as the eye can see. Many respond with anger, honking horns, cursing other drivers. But does anger move the cars? Does it clear the road? No. The Stoic knows the traffic is beyond his control, but his mood is not. He can choose to listen to music, reflect, or simply accept the moment with calm. By doing so, he turns a prison into a pause, an annoyance into an exercise of patience. Or take the example of aging. No matter how much money, power, or science we accumulate, time continues its march. Wrinkles appear, strength fades, loved ones pass away. To fight this truth with denial is to invite endless suffering, but to accept aging as part of life, and to focus instead on gratitude, wisdom, and the cultivation of inner peace, is to discover freedom even in decline. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." The Stoic accepts the inevitability of aging and death, and therefore lives more fully in the present. This lesson, control what you can, accept what you cannot, is more than a philosophical idea, it is a daily practice. Each morning, we can remind ourselves, what is mine today? My thoughts, my actions, my words. What is not mine? The weather, the stock market, the opinions of strangers, the passage of time. With this clarity, we step into the day lighter, freer, less burdened by the impossible. Over time, this discipline reshapes the soul. Anxiety loosens its grip because we stop wrestling with shadows. Resentment fades because we stop expecting the world to obey us. Energy once wasted on complaints flows instead into growth, gratitude, and purpose. The Stoic does not become emotionless, he becomes anchored. Joy still arises, but it is no longer fragile, because it does not depend on unstable externals. Sadness still visits, but it does not drown, because the Stoic knows the difference between what belongs to him and what does not. To live this way is to carry an inner citadel. Marcus Aurelius often described the mind as a fortress. External events may pound at the gates, but within, the ruler of the soul decides what enters. If we train this inner ruler with wisdom, no storm can overthrow us. The enemy is not the chaos outside, but the illusion that we can command it. Freedom begins when we abandon that illusion and stand firm within our own domain. In the end, the wisdom of the Stoics offers not escape from life, but deeper participation in it. When we stop wasting time on what we cannot change, we free ourselves to act powerfully where we can. We treat others with kindness, because their reaction is not ours to control, but our virtue is. We embrace each day with gratitude, because tomorrow is not ours to guarantee, but today is ours to live. We face misfortune with dignity, because fortune is not ours to choose, but character always is. And so, the first lesson of Stoicism is both the simplest and the hardest: to draw the line clearly, to accept the universe as it is, and to live fully within our sphere of control. This lesson, if practiced daily, transforms the way we walk through the world. We no longer stumble in chains of anger or resentment, we walk with calm strength. For the Stoic, peace is not found in controlling the uncontrollable, but in mastering the one domain that was always truly ours, our own mind. Lesson 2: see obstacles as opportunities. Every human life is marked by struggle. No one escapes illness, loss, failure, or disappointment. Yet while most people see these difficulties as curses to avoid at all costs, the Stoics taught a radical idea: obstacles are not merely barriers, they can be transformed into pathways. To the Stoic, adversity is not an interruption of life but a vital part of it, a training ground for the soul. Marcus Aurelius, writing in the solitude of his own challenges as emperor, reminded himself, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." These words are among the most famous of Stoic philosophy. They tell us that each obstacle contains within it the seed of growth, if only we choose to cultivate it. The very thing that blocks our path may become the path itself. Think about the difficulties you have faced in your own life. Perhaps you lost a job you valued, endured a betrayal from a friend, or suffered a painful failure in your dreams. In the moment, each experience felt crushing, almost unbearable, but looking back, can you see how these events shaped you? Perhaps losing the job forced you to develop new skills and led you to a career you never imagined. Perhaps the betrayal taught you discernment and resilience, showing you the kind of loyalty you must give and expect. Perhaps the failure stripped away illusions and gave you a deeper humility. This is the Stoic perspective. The world will throw obstacles in your path, but you decide whether they destroy you or strengthen you. Epictetus, who was born into slavery and crippled by a master's cruelty, could have drowned in bitterness. Instead, he turned his suffering into wisdom. Difficulties show what men are. He said, therefore, when a difficulty falls upon you, remember that God, like a trainer of wrestlers, has matched you with a rough young man. For what end? To turn you into Olympic champion. In this metaphor, every hardship is a sparring partner designed to bring out your strength. Without opposition, the wrestler grows weak. Without difficulty, the soul grows soft. In our modern age, we often seek comfort and convenience above all else. We want smooth roads, predictable days, and effortless success, but comfort alone rarely produces greatness. It is in the face of obstacles that we discover who we are. The storm tests the strength of the ship. The fire tests the purity of gold. The obstacle tests the resilience of the human spirit. If life were only easy, our potential would remain hidden. Consider the story of Thomas Edison. After thousands of failed attempts to create the electric light bulb, he was asked how he endured so much failure. He replied, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Each obstacle was not the end but a step forward. The light we now take for granted was born out of relentless confrontation with failure. Though Edison was not a Stoic, his perspective resonates deeply with Stoic wisdom. Failure is not defeat if it is used as fuel for perseverance. Closer to daily life, think of the student who struggles with a difficult subject. At first, the obstacle feels humiliating, as if it reveals weakness. But in choosing to persist, the student develops patience, discipline, and creativity. Years later, the very struggle becomes a source of pride, for it forged a stronger mind. Or think of someone recovering from illness. The body is weakened, but the soul learns gratitude for each breath, each step, each day of health. What once seemed an obstacle, pain, limitation, becomes a doorway to deeper appreciation of life. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that obstacles were not punishments from fate but natural events in a universe governed by change. To resist them was futile. To embrace them was wisdom. Does what has happened keep you from acting with justice, generosity, self-control, sanity, prudence, honesty, humility, straightforwardness? He asked himself. If not, then don't be upset. The obstacle cannot touch the true self. Notice how Marcus shifts the perspective. The obstacle may delay your plans, but it cannot stop you from living with virtue. And if virtue remains intact, then nothing essential has been lost. The Stoic does not deny that obstacles are painful. Illness hurts, loss grieves, failure stings, but pain is not the enemy. Wasted pain is. If suffering teaches us nothing, if it hardens us into bitterness or despair, then it becomes meaningless. But if suffering is transformed into endurance, compassion, or strength, then even the darkest night contains a hidden gift. One way the Stoics practiced this transformation was through the discipline of perception. When something went wrong, instead of immediately judging it as bad, they asked, "What can I make of this? How can I turn this to advantage?" Suppose you are insulted, the natural response is anger. But the Stoic reframes, "Here is an opportunity to practice patience, to test whether words alone can disturb the fortress of the mind." Suppose you are delayed by misfortune. The natural response is frustration. But the Stoic reframes, "Here is a chance to cultivate calm, to remember that time is always passing, and only the present is ours. This is not easy. It requires daily effort, a deliberate training of the mind. Just as muscles grow only by resistance, the soul grows only by struggle. Seneca observed, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." He saw clearly that the obstacle is not an interruption of the journey, it is the means by which the journey is fulfilled. In our own era, surrounded by conveniences our ancestors could never imagine, it is tempting to avoid obstacles at every turn. We fear failure, so we never attempt. We fear rejection, so we never speak. We fear loss, so we never love fully. But in avoiding obstacles, we also avoid growth. The Stoic way calls us to face obstacles with open eyes and steady hearts. To see in every setback a chance to strengthen our inner citadel. Imagine two people climbing a mountain. One complains at every rock, every steep slope, every gust of wind. The other accepts each challenge as part of the climb, using it to build endurance and skill. Both reach the summit exhausted, but only one has grown stronger through the journey. Life, like the mountain, does not change to suit our wishes, but our perspective changes everything. The obstacle remains the same, but the meaning we assign to it transforms it from enemy to teacher. Even in extreme misfortune, the Stoic insists that opportunity remains. A prisoner may lose freedom of movement but gain freedom of thought. A widow may lose the comfort of a partner but discover an inner reservoir of courage. A person facing death may lose time but gain clarity about what truly matters. The obstacle strips away illusions, but what is left can be more precious than what was taken. Marcus Aurelius himself ruled during plagues, wars, and political betrayal. His life was filled with obstacles that would crush most men, yet he chose to see them as part of his role, as opportunities to practice justice, patience, and humility. In the end, his meditations remain not as a record of complaints but as a manual for resilience. He did not write, "Why me?" but rather, "How can I respond with virtue here and now?" To live this lesson is to walk through life with unshakable calm. We stop asking the world to clear the path for us, and instead we learn to walk even when the path is blocked. We stop fearing misfortune, and instead we ask what it can teach us. We stop seeing obstacles as signals to quit, and instead see them as invitations to grow. This is not blind optimism or naive positivity. The Stoics did not sugarcoat suffering. Rather, they taught us to transform suffering into wisdom, to redeem it by choice. When we embrace obstacles this way, even failure becomes fertile ground. We learn humility, patience, gratitude, resilience. These qualities, forged in the fire of adversity, are the very ones that last when comforts fade. In this sense, obstacles are not interruptions of life, they are the essence of life. They remind us that control is limited, but freedom is always possible, because we can always choose how to respond. The Stoic who sees obstacles as opportunities walks through the world lighter, freer, more courageous, for he knows that even when fortune turns against him, the turning itself may reveal a new path, and so he does not curse the stone in his way, he uses it to step higher. Lesson 3: Silence is strength. There is a kind of strength that does not shout, does not boast, and does not need to announce itself. It is quiet, steady, and deeply rooted. The Stoics knew this strength well, and they practiced it not through endless words, but through silence. To them, silence was not weakness, nor was it emptiness. It was discipline, clarity, and power. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you are disturbed by external things, it is not they that disturb you, but your own judgment of them, and it is in your power to wipe out that judgment now." His point was simple: the noise of the world is constant. But our true strength lies in our ability to quiet our response, to remain calm when others are lost in chaos. Silence, then, is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of self-control. For those of us who have lived many years, we know the temptation of reacting too quickly. A cutting remark, a political debate, an insult from a stranger. It is easy to let anger rise and words spill out that cannot be taken back. In youth, we think our voice must always be heard, that we must win every argument, prove every point, defend our pride at every turn. But with age, if we are wise, we begin to see that true strength is found not in speaking, but in knowing when not to speak. Think about the times in your life when silence brought peace. Perhaps you avoided an argument with your spouse by choosing to listen instead of to fight. Perhaps you spared yourself regret by not replying to a cruel message. Perhaps you saved a friendship by refusing to respond in anger when provoked. In those moments, silence was not passive. It was active strength. You chose mastery over impulse, dignity over pride. The Stoics valued silence because they understood that words, once spoken, cannot be undone. Seneca reminded us, "I have often regretted speaking, but never regretted remaining silent." This is a truth that resonates deeply with those who have lived long enough to see the damage reckless words can do. Friendships ruined, families divided, peace shattered, all from a sentence spoken in haste. And yet, when we remain silent, we give ourselves the gift of time. Time to think, to cool the fire, to choose a response worthy of our character. In modern America, we live in a culture that rewards loudness. From television to social media, the voices that dominate are often the ones that shout the loudest. Everyone seems eager to speak, to argue, to prove, to perform. Silence is rarely valued, but perhaps that is why it has become even more powerful. In a noisy world, the one who can remain calm and quiet stands out, while others are swept away in arguments and outrage. The Stoic practices restraint. He asks himself, does this need to be said? Does this need to be said by me? Does this need to be said now? Most of the time, the answer is no. Silence is also a teacher. When we stop talking, we begin to hear, not just the voices of others, but the whispers of our own mind, the lessons of our own heart. How often do we talk over ourselves, drowning out the very wisdom we seek? The Stoics practiced daily reflection, quiet time to think, to journal, to examine their own lives. In that silence, they grew in clarity. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations not for an audience, but for himself, in silence, in solitude. It was in those quiet moments that his wisdom was forged. For older generations, silence offers another gift, the ability to look back without judgment, to reflect with peace. When we are young, our lives are filled with noise, career ambitions, family responsibilities, the rush of constant doing. But as we age, silence becomes an opportunity, not a burden. It gives us space to notice the small things, the sound of birds at dawn, the warmth of a morning cup of coffee, the laughter of grandchildren. Silence turns ordinary moments into treasures. Yet silence is not always easy. Many people fear it. They fill their days with noise, television always on, radio in the car, endless scrolling on the phone, because silence confronts us with ourselves. And that, perhaps, is the greatest test, to sit quietly and face our own thoughts, our own regrets, our own mortality, requires courage. The Stoics knew this. They did not run from silence, they embraced it. For in silence we learn who we are. Epictetus taught his students that our worth is not in how well we argue, but in how well we live. He would have laughed at the endless shouting matches of our age. True strength, he said, is revealed in character, not in noise. To endure insult without retaliation, to remain calm in the face of provocation, to listen more than we speak, these are the marks of the wise. Silence is not cowardice, it is courage of the highest kind. Think of the oak tree standing firm in a storm. It does not shout back at the wind. It bends, it endures, and in its quiet endurance, it displays its strength. Silence works the same way in our lives. When the storms of anger or chaos surround us, silence roots us. We do not add to the storm, we outlast it. Silence also creates space for others. In conversation, when we hold back, we allow others to reveal themselves. Often, people want not our words, but our presence. To sit with a grieving friend in silence can bring more comfort than 1,000 speeches. To listen to a child without interrupting can give them confidence to speak their heart. To let a loved one express frustration without rushing to respond can save the bond between you. In these ways, silence is not absence, but presence at its deepest. For older Americans who have lived through decades of change, silence becomes a kind of wisdom passed down. Grandparents may not need to lecture. The quiet example teaches more. Parents may not always need to argue. Their steady presence says enough. Silence teaches by being, not by saying, and this is why, in many cultures, the elders are honored, not for how loudly they speak, but for how deeply they embody what they know. Seneca captured this truth well. It is better to restrain the tongue than to be sorry for its freedom. Those of us who have spoken too quickly know the sting of his words. Silence prevents regret. It keeps us from adding fuel to the fire. And in a society that thrives on constant reaction, the Stoic who practices silence is like a stone in the river, calm, steady, unmoved. None of this means we must never speak. Stoicism does not call for muteness. Words are powerful, and when used with wisdom, they can heal, inspire, and guide. But the lesson is this: the fewer words we use, the more weight they carry. A quiet person who rarely speaks is listened to with more attention than one who never stops talking. Silence gives our words gravity. In the end, silence is strength because it reveals mastery of the self. The loudest voice in the room is often the weakest. Desperate for attention, validation, or control, the silent one, calm and unshaken, reveals that he needs none of those things. He is free, and freedom, to the Stoics, is the highest strength. So when the world provokes you, when anger rises, when pride urges you to speak, remember, silence is an option, and often it is the wisest one. In silence, we preserve our dignity, our peace, and our strength. For the Stoics, silence was not emptiness, but the fullness of self-control. And perhaps in our own lives, especially as we grow older, we can rediscover its power. Lesson 4: Detach from the opinions of others. One of the greatest prisons we build for ourselves is the prison of other people's opinions. From a young age, we are taught to care about what others think. We want approval from our parents, acceptance from our friends, recognition from our colleagues, and while some of this desire is natural, if we are not careful, it can dominate our lives. The Stoics saw clearly that living for the opinions of others is a form of slavery. True freedom begins the moment we stop giving power to judgments we cannot control. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself often, "I have to go on living as nature requires. Let people think what they like, say what they like, it makes no difference." Here was a man who was emperor of Rome, watched by millions, judged by both allies and enemies. And yet, in his private reflections, he reminded himself that the opinions of the crowd could not touch his inner self. What mattered was not what they thought, but how he chose to live. For those of us who have lived long enough, we know how exhausting it can be to chase approval. There is always someone who disapproves, someone who criticizes, someone who misunderstands. You cannot please everyone, try as you may. There will always be voices of discontent. Perhaps you have seen this in your own life. You worked hard, but your effort went unnoticed. You acted with kindness, but someone still complained. You spoke honestly, and someone twisted your words. If you live by their approval, you will never find rest. The Stoics tell us to ask a simple question: whose opinion truly matters? Not the opinion of the gossip, not the judgment of the stranger, not the fleeting praise of the crowd. What matters is whether you have lived in accordance with virtue, with honesty, with justice, with courage, with wisdom. Seneca put it plainly: what difference does it make to you what someone else says about you? You are not the one he is talking about. In other words, their judgment reflects their mind, not your reality. Detaching from opinions does not mean arrogance or indifference to people. It does not mean we stop caring for others. Rather, it means we stop placing our peace of mind in their hands. We act with kindness because kindness is right, not because it wins applause. We live with integrity because integrity is noble, not because it earns praise. When criticism comes, we examine it honestly. If it contains truth, we learn from it. If it does not, we let it go. In either case, our peace remains intact. Think about how much time is wasted in worry over what others think. The young person spends hours trying to impress peers. The professional loses sleep over a colleague's opinion. The parent shapes decisions only to satisfy the judgment of neighbors. The result is not freedom, but bondage. And for what? The opinions of others shift like the wind. Today's praise becomes tomorrow's criticism. Today's admiration turns into tomorrow's gossip. To build our happiness on such unstable ground is to build a house on sand. Epictetus taught, if you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. These words strike hard, especially in a culture that prizes reputation and image. But Epictetus knew the truth. Growth often looks strange to others. If you live with discipline, people may mock you as rigid. If you live simply, people may call you poor. If you forgive easily, people may call you weak. But their labels do not define you. What defines you is whether you live with virtue. The Stoic accepts misunderstanding as the price of integrity. For older generations, this lesson carries special weight. By the time we reach the later stages of life, we often see clearly how little the opinions of others truly matter. The criticisms that once wounded us deeply now seem like passing shadows. The praise that once lifted us high now feels hollow. What endures is not what others said, but how we lived. Did we act with courage when it mattered? Did we treat others with fairness and compassion? Did we remain true to ourselves even when misunderstood? These are the questions that shape a life, not whether the crowd approved. Imagine a man walking through a marketplace. People shout at him, some with praise, some with insults. If he stopped at every voice, he would never reach his destination. The wise man keeps walking, listening only to the compass of his conscience. In the same way, life is filled with voices, family, friends, colleagues, strangers on the internet. If we stop to chase approval or defend against every insult, we lose our way. But if we walk steadily with virtue, the voices fade into background noise. This does not mean it is easy. We are social creatures. We want to belong, to be respected, to be loved. But belonging cannot come at the cost of our soul. The Stoic reminds us that we already possess dignity, not because others grant it, but because we are rational beings capable of virtue. No opinion can add or subtract from that truth. Seneca once warned, if you live according to the opinions of others, you will never live for yourself. To live for yourself does not mean selfishness. It means living in alignment with your own principles, not constantly bending to the shifting demands of others. When you detach from opinions, you begin to live authentically. You dress not to impress, but to be comfortable. You speak not to flatter, but to be honest. You act not for applause, but for goodness itself. In modern America, where social media amplifies every voice, this lesson is more important than ever. With a single post, thousands of strangers can judge, criticize, or praise. Many feel trapped, living for likes and shares, terrified of disapproval. The Stoic response is clear. Remember what is within your control. Your post, your action, your words are yours, but the reactions of others, they are not. If you anchor your worth in their hands, you will always be tossed by the tide. Silence, as we saw in the previous lesson, is often strength, and so too is detachment from opinion. Together, they form a shield. Silence keeps us from fueling conflict. Detachment keeps us from being chained by approval. In this way, the Stoic builds a calm inner world, free from the noise of judgment. Think back on your own life. Can you remember times when you allowed fear of judgment to hold you back? Perhaps you wanted to pursue a dream but worried what others would think. Perhaps you wanted to speak the truth but stayed silent to avoid criticism. And yet, when you finally acted, when you chose authenticity over approval, you likely found freedom. That freedom is what the Stoics call true strength. Marcus Aurelius said, I have often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, yet sets less value on his own opinion of himself than on the opinion of others. What a paradox. We love ourselves, yet we hand over our peace to strangers. The Stoic corrects this mistake by valuing his own reasoned judgment above the fleeting voices of others. As we grow older, we realize that many of the opinions we once feared are long forgotten. The colleague who criticized us is gone. The neighbor who gossiped about us has moved away. The strangers who judged us never really knew us at all. And yet, if we allowed their words to control us, we wasted precious years. Life is too short to be lived under the shadow of others' opinions. True peace comes when we detach from the need to be liked or approved. Then we can act with courage, speak with honesty, live with integrity. Then we can look back on our days without regret, knowing we did not live as slaves to the crowd, but as free men and women. So let us take this lesson from the Stoics: detach from the opinions of others. Do not let them rob you of your peace. Do not let them dictate your choices. Their opinions are theirs, not yours. What is yours is your character, your virtue, your life. Live it with strength, and let the voices pass like wind. Lesson 5: Practice negative visualization. One of the most surprising teachings of the Stoics is the practice of negative visualization. At first glance, it sounds strange. Why would we deliberately imagine bad things happening? Why would we spend time thinking about loss, failure, or death? Isn't the purpose of wisdom to avoid such gloomy thoughts? And yet, the Stoics believed that by regularly picturing the worst, we could actually live better, freer, and calmer lives. Seneca once wrote, "He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand." What he meant was this: when we take time to imagine difficulties before they happen, we are not inviting misery, we are preparing our minds. By rehearsing adversity in thought, we lessen its sting in reality. A man who has already considered the loss of his wealth, for example, will suffer less if fortune takes it away, because he has trained himself to see that life does not end with possessions. Negative visualization does not mean pessimism. The Stoics were not asking us to walk through life in constant dread. Instead, they invited us to occasionally pause and reflect. What if I lost this? What if this comfort disappeared? What if this day were my last? Such questions are not meant to make us fearful, but grateful. When we recognize that nothing is guaranteed, everything becomes more precious. Think of a parent watching their child sleep. In our culture, we often push away thoughts of mortality, but the Stoic parent may quietly remind themselves, "This child is not mine forever. One day, he may be taken from me." Far from making the parent cold, this thought deepens love. It reminds the parent to cherish each moment, to speak kindly, to hold the child close, because tomorrow is never promised. Negative visualization transforms ordinary presence into sacred gratitude. For those of us who have lived long, we know loss is part of life. We have lost parents, friends, perhaps even children. We have seen health decline, opportunities slip away, time move faster than we expected. The Stoics did not deny this reality. They faced it directly, not with despair, but with courage. By imagining loss before it came, they softened its impact and prepared their hearts to accept life as it unfolded. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily. He reminded himself, "When you kiss your child, whisper to yourself, tomorrow he may die." At first, this seems harsh, but Marcus was not saying we should stop loving. He was saying we should love more deeply. By acknowledging the fragility of life, we free ourselves from taking it for granted. The thought of impermanence awakens us. Instead of walking through life half asleep, assuming tomorrow will always come, we are pulled into the richness of the present moment. Consider how this practice can change our perspective on simple things. Imagine your morning coffee. If you remind yourself, "One day, I may no longer have the strength to make this," you drink it more slowly, savoring each sip. Imagine your spouse sitting across the table. If you think, "This could be our last meal together," you look at them with greater tenderness. Imagine your health, your ability to walk, to breathe easily, to see clearly. If you reflect, "Someday I may lose these abilities," then today's ordinary walk or conversation feels like a gift. Negative visualization is not about dwelling on darkness, it is about shining light on what we already have. Epictetus encouraged his students to remember that everything we love is, on loan, from nature. He said, "Never say about anything, 'I have lost it,' but only, 'I have returned it.' Has your child died? It has been returned. Has your wife died? She has been returned." For him, the universe is like a generous host lending us gifts. To forget they are borrowed is to cling too tightly. To remember their temporary nature is to love them more honestly. In modern America, where consumer culture teaches us to cling to possessions and fear loss, this Stoic lesson feels both radical and liberating. Advertisements tell us we must always acquire more wealth, more comfort, more security, but negative visualization reminds us that nothing external is truly secure. Cars rust, houses collapse, bodies age, fortunes shift. If we stake our happiness on things that must fade, we guarantee disappointment. But if we rehearse their loss in our minds, we prepare our hearts to remain calm when change arrives. Let us take a simple example: your health. Imagine yourself growing weaker, unable to do the things you take for granted today. Does this frighten you? Perhaps, but it also reminds you to treasure the strength you have now. To walk without pain, to lift your grandchild, to work in your garden. These are miracles disguised as ordinary routines. By imagining their loss, we awaken gratitude for their presence. Or consider friendships. How often do we neglect to call or visit those we love, assuming they will always be there? But what if you reminded yourself, "This may be the last time I see them"? Would you not make the effort? Would you not listen more carefully, speak more kindly, hold the moment more closely? Negative visualization moves us from indifference to deep appreciation. Seneca urged his students to take time each day to imagine disaster, not to live in fear, but to strengthen the soul. Fortune falls heavily on those for whom she's unexpected. He said, "The man who has pictured misfortunes in advance can meet them with composure." In other words, when the storm comes, the unprepared are swept away. But the Stoic stands firm, for he has already weathered it in his mind. This practice is especially meaningful as we age. The more years we have behind us, the more we realize that loss is inevitable. Friends pass away, family members leave, our own strength declines. But instead of shrinking from these truths, the Stoic invites us to embrace them. In doing so, we become gentler, calmer, more appreciative. Death does not terrify us as much, because we have already made peace with its presence. Loss does not crush us completely, because we have rehearsed letting go. Think of negative visualization as a rehearsal for gratitude. By picturing the loss of what we hold dear, we become aware of its value now. Every breath becomes a blessing. Every moment becomes enough. Far from depressing us, this practice fills life with deeper joy. As one modern writer put it, contemplating the worst makes the present feel like a gift. The key, however, is balance. The Stoics did not dwell on loss constantly. They did not walk around gloomy or fearful. Instead, they used brief, intentional moments to remind themselves of life's fragility. They trained their minds the way a soldier trains in the quiet before battle, so that when hardship arrived, they were not surprised. They accepted reality as it came, for they had already met it in thought. To practice negative visualization today, you do not need a temple or a long ritual. You can simply pause each morning and ask, "What if this day were my last? What if I lost this comfort tomorrow? What if this person I love were gone?" Then let those thoughts guide you, not to despair, but to appreciation. Let them remind you to live fully, to love deeply, to act with kindness while you still can. The Stoics knew that by contemplating the end, we learn to cherish the middle. By imagining loss, we learn to value presence. By facing death, we learn to live. This is the paradox of negative visualization. By rehearsing the worst, we discover the best. So the next time you wake up and see the sun, remember, it may be the last sunrise you behold. And let that thought fill you not with fear, but with wonder. The next time you share a meal, remember, it may be the last with that companion. Let it remind you to listen more, laugh more, love more. The next time you hold a child, remember, they will grow. And one day, They will be gone. Let it remind you to treasure the moment. In the end, negative visualization is not about death, it is about life. It is not about loss, it is about love. It is not about fear, it is about freedom. For the one who accepts that everything is temporary no longer clings desperately, but embraces joy while it lasts. And when the time comes to let go, they release without bitterness, because they have been preparing all along. Lesson 6: Live with simplicity. The Stoics believed that simplicity was not a restriction, but a doorway to freedom. They lived in an age, much like ours, where wealth and status tempted men and women to measure themselves by what they possessed rather than who they were. Against this current, the Stoics spoke with clarity. To live simply is not to live poorly, but to live wisely, for it is not the abundance of possessions that makes a life rich, but the abundance of virtue, gratitude, and inner calm. Epictetus, who was born into slavery and later freed, knew well what it meant to live with little. He said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." To him, a man who desires nothing beyond his basic needs is richer than the emperor who craves more with every passing day. Simplicity, then, was not about deprivation but about contentment, being satisfied with what is already at hand, rather than enslaved by the endless pursuit of more. Think for a moment about how much of modern anxiety comes from complexity. Houses stuffed with possessions, calendars crowded with obligations, minds buzzing with distractions. People often believe that by adding more, another gadget, another title, another achievement, they will find peace. Yet more often than not, the result is the opposite. Clutter outside becomes clutter inside. The Stoics would remind us that a man burdened by excess is not free. He is imprisoned by his own desires. Simplicity is the act of clearing away the unnecessary so that the essential may shine. Marcus Aurelius, who lived in a palace and commanded the might of Rome, often reminded himself of the brevity of life and the futility of luxury. In his meditations he wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself." In your way of thinking, this was not theory for him, it was survival. As emperor, surrounded by temptations of wealth, flattery, and indulgence, Marcus turned inward and trained himself to remain simple, lest the empire consume his soul. Seneca, though wealthy himself, constantly warned of the dangers of comfort. He practiced voluntary poverty, setting aside days to eat coarse bread, to sleep on the ground, to wear simple clothes, reminding himself that happiness does not depend on silk and gold. Set aside a certain number of days, he advised, during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, "Is this the condition that I feared?" By rehearsing simplicity, he freed himself from fear. If he could endure little, he knew fortune could never enslave him with promises of much. Simplicity is not only about possessions, but also about desires. To simplify our wants is to lighten the burden we place upon our souls. Consider food. The man who demands exotic dishes is never satisfied. The man who delights in bread and water is free. Consider clothing. The woman who must chase every new fashion feels restless. The woman who is content with modest attire is serene. Consider homes. The family who always dreams of bigger and grander houses finds no peace. The family who finds joy in their present home finds wealth without measure. For older generations, simplicity becomes even more precious. With age, one learns that possessions decay, reputations fade, and wealth cannot be carried beyond the grave. The glitter of the world loses its charm, but the quiet joys of simplicity endure: a sunrise, a shared meal, a gentle word, the laughter of a grandchild. Simplicity opens our eyes to these treasures, reminding us that happiness was never hidden in gold but in the present moment. Lived well. Imagine, for a moment, a man sitting in a grand dining hall filled with noise, extravagance, and excess. He feasts, but he does not taste. He drinks, but he does not savor. He laughs, but it is shallow. Now imagine another man, seated in a small garden, with a simple meal of bread, cheese, and fruit. He eats slowly, savoring each bite. He listens to the wind, watches the trees, feels the warmth of the sun. Who is richer? The Stoics would say, the second man. For he is awake to life as it is, not distracted by the hunger for more. In our own lives, the pursuit of more often hides the poverty of the soul. We buy not because we need, but because we are restless. We fill our homes with things, but still feel empty. The Stoics remind us, simplicity is not about stripping life bare, but about discovering that less can be more. When you declutter the unnecessary, you make space for what truly matters: virtue, presence, gratitude, and peace. Epictetus taught that our desires enslave us if we are not careful. He warned, it is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And part of that reaction is whether we demand life to be grand and luxurious, or whether we can find joy in its simplicity. The man who trains his desires to be modest cannot be enslaved, for nothing essential can be taken from him. Simplicity also extends to time. How many of us clutter our schedules with obligations that bring little joy or meaning? We rush from one task to the next, never pausing to breathe, never pausing to live. The Stoics encourage us to simplify our days, to say no to what is trivial, so that we may say yes to what is essential. A day lived with clarity and calm, even in modest surroundings, is wealth beyond measure. Consider this: when was the last time you sat in silence? Without television, without phone, without distraction, simply being present with yourself. For many, it is a rare experience. And yet, the Stoics would argue that these are the richest moments of all. For, in simplicity, the noise of the world fades, and the voice of reason, of wisdom, of the soul, can finally be heard. Seneca warned that luxury makes us soft, fragile, dependent. Simplicity, on the other hand, makes us resilient. A person who can live with little is not afraid of fortune's twists. If wealth comes, he enjoys it without attachment. If it goes, he endures without despair. The treadmill of endless craving. To say, this is sufficient, is to discover joy right here, right now. Simplicity does not mean rejecting progress or refusing comfort. It means holding them lightly, never confusing them with happiness, never letting them own us. Marcus Aurelius lived surrounded by wealth but reminded himself daily to avoid being corrupted by it. Receive without pride, let go without attachment. He said, this is the essence of simplicity, to enjoy what comes, but never to cling, for clinging is the source of anxiety, but letting go is the source of peace. To practice this lesson, we can begin small. Simplify a corner of your home. Remove what is unnecessary. Notice the calm that comes from space. Simplify your desires. Choose gratitude over craving. When you eat, eat simply and slowly, appreciating each bite. When you speak, speak simply, with honesty, without exaggeration. When you live, live simply, without masks, without endless striving for appearances. Each small step toward simplicity is a step toward freedom. The Stoics knew that simplicity was the foundation of strength. A soldier weighed down by gold cannot march. A man weighed down by desires cannot be free. But the one who travels light, in possessions and in spirit, walks with steady steps. Simplicity makes us strong not by removing joy, but by revealing where true joy is found. So let us learn to live simply, to clear the clutter of possessions, desires, and distractions, to delight in what is small, what is ordinary, what is already ours, to remember that enough is a feast. The Stoics remind us that in simplicity lies freedom, in simplicity lies peace, and in simplicity lies the quiet, enduring joy of a life well lived. Lesson 7: Focus on the present moment. The present moment is the only place where life truly happens. The Stoics knew this with a clarity that still feels revolutionary today. They lived nearly 2,000 years ago, but their words pierced directly into the restless heart of modern life. We spend so much of our time either looking back in regret or looking forward in worry. And in doing so, we miss the one thing we ever truly possess, this very moment. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wrote in his Meditations, Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you while you live, while it is in your power. Be good. His reminder was not meant to make life gloomy. It was meant to awaken urgency. Life is not endless. It is not a rehearsal. We cannot live yesterday again, and we cannot step into tomorrow before it arrives. What we have is now, and in now lies the fullness of life. Think of how often peace is stolen from us by regrets of the past. We replay conversations we cannot change, decisions we cannot undo, mistakes that have already been made. Reflection is valuable. It teaches us lessons. But once the lesson is learned, to cling to the past is to chain ourselves to shadows. The Stoics would say, let the past instruct you, but do not let it imprison you. To dwell endlessly on what cannot be changed is to rob yourself of the life still ahead. On the other side lies the tyranny of the future. We worry about what may happen, spinning endless scenarios in our minds. Will I be safe? Will my loved ones be healthy? Will I succeed? The mind projects fear after fear, many of which never come true. Seneca said it best, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. How many of our nights are spent in this imaginary suffering, borrowing tomorrow's troubles without its strength? And yet, even when trouble does arrive, we are rarely as helpless as we feared. By living in tomorrow's anxieties, we weaken today's strength. The Stoics offered a solution: to anchor ourselves firmly in the present. This does not mean we forget the past or fail to plan for the future. It means we do not lose ourselves in either. The past gives us lessons. The future gives us direction. But only the present gives us life. To ignore it is to lose everything. Epictetus taught, do not seek to have events happen as you want them to, but instead want them to happen as they do happen, and your life will go well. That is the heart of presence, not resisting what is before us, not fleeing into fantasies of past and future, but receiving this moment fully, exactly as it is. Think of moments in your life when you were fully present. Perhaps it was watching a sunset, with no thought of yesterday's worries or tomorrow's tasks. Perhaps it was holding a child, your whole heart focused on their laugh or their small hand in yours. Perhaps it was working in the garden, the soil in your hands, the sun on your face. In those moments, life was not elsewhere. It was here. You were not missing it, because you were living it. That is what the Stoics want for us, not to lose life in distraction, but to wake up to the miracle of each day. For older generations, this lesson strikes with even greater clarity. The more years we carry, the more we know how quickly time passes. We see how easily decades slip away while we were busy with worries, obligations, or ambitions. Presence becomes not just wisdom but necessity. If we wait for the perfect moment to live, it will never come. The present moment is imperfect, yes, but it is all we will ever have, and it is enough. Simplicity, which we explored in the previous lesson, supports presence. When life is less cluttered, both in possessions and in thought, the present moment becomes easier to see. Gratitude flourishes. Instead of rushing past what we have, always chasing what is next, we begin to notice the taste of food, the sound of a friend's voice, the light in the trees. To live simply is to live presently. The Stoics also used daily practices to strengthen this awareness. Marcus Aurelius began his mornings by reminding himself, today is all I have. Today I will face challenges, but I will also have the power to respond with justice, courage, moderation, and wisdom. At night, he would reflect, did I live today according to virtue? Did I act well in the moments given to me? These practices anchored him, and they can anchor us. We can apply this ourselves. Each morning, pause before the day begins. Take a breath and remember, this day is not guaranteed. How will I live it? What virtues will I practice? Each evening, pause before sleep. Ask yourself, did I use the day well? Did I waste it in worry? Or did I live it with presence and gratitude? Such reflections slowly train the mind to return to the present, again and again, until it becomes natural. Consider too the wisdom of nature. The bird sings only in the present. It does not lament yesterday's storms or fear tomorrow's winds. The tree grows in this season, in this soil, not in regret or anticipation. Nature itself is fully present, and the Stoics invite us to join it. To live aligned with nature is to live aligned with the present. In our modern American culture, presence feels almost impossible. Phones buzz with endless notifications. Screens demand attention. Advertisements push us to crave the next thing, the next achievement, the next distraction. But the Stoic call is to resist this constant pulling away, to turn off the noise, to step away, to reclaim the ability to be here. Even a few minutes of silence, a walk without a phone, a meal eaten slowly, these can restore presence. Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." The waste, he meant, was in distraction, in regret, in worry. When we lose the present moment, we lose life itself. But when we live each day as if it were both our first and our last, life suddenly feels abundant. Even ordinary hours shine with extraordinary meaning. The Stoics did not practice presence only for peace, but for virtue. The present moment is where we can choose justice, where we can practice courage, where we can exercise moderation, where we can apply wisdom. We cannot act in the past, and we cannot act in the future. We can act only now. This is why presence is not just philosophy but morality. To miss the present is to miss the only arena where virtue can live. So how do we begin? Start small. Put aside distractions for one meal. Take a walk and notice everything, the sounds, the colors, the air. Listen fully to one conversation without thinking of your reply. Practice gratitude for one moment in the day, reminding yourself, this may be the last time you experience this exact moment. Over time, these small practices grow into a habit of presence, and presence grows into peace. In the end, focusing on the present moment is not about ignoring the past or denying the future. It is about giving each its proper place. Learn from yesterday, plan for tomorrow, but live today. Life is not found in memory or imagination, it is found in presence. And the Stoics call us, again and again, to return to it. So let us heed their wisdom. Let us not waste our days in regret or anxiety. Let us not wait for a perfect moment that never comes. Let us live here, now, fully awake, fully grateful, fully alive. For the present moment is not small. It is everything, and if we live it well, then no matter how many years we are given, we will have lived enough. Lesson 8. Accept death as part of life. Of all the lessons the Stoics left us, none is more difficult, yet more liberating, than the acceptance of death. Death is the shadow that walks beside us from the moment we are born. Though we spend much of life pretending it is not there, we distract ourselves with work, with possessions, with entertainment, pushing aside the thought that one day, without warning, our time will run out. The Stoics, however, refused to look away. They turned toward death, studied it, spoke of it openly, and in doing so, discovered the secret to living fully. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, faced battles, plagues, betrayals, and the constant reminder that his life could end at any moment. In his meditations he wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." For Marcus, death was not a distant event but a present possibility. Rather than frighten him, this thought sharpened his focus. If today were to be his last, then every word, every action, every breath must be lived with virtue. Seneca, too, reflected often on death. He wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." He reminded his readers that life feels brief not because death comes too soon, but because we squander our days as though they were endless. By remembering death, we awaken to life. The clock is always ticking, and each moment wasted in anger, worry, or distraction is a moment we cannot recover. For the Stoics, death was not the enemy. It was nature. Just as autumn leaves must fall, just as night must follow day, so must our lives come to an end. To resist this truth is to fight the universe itself. Epictetus urged his students to see death as a return, not a loss. Never say about anything, "I have lost it," but only, "I have returned it." Has your child died? It has been returned. Has your wife died? She has been returned. Has your estate been taken? That too has been returned. To him, life was a loan from nature, and death was simply the repayment. But acceptance does not mean coldness. The Stoics did not teach us to stop loving, to detach from all joy. On the contrary, acceptance deepens our love. When we know life is temporary, we cherish it more. When we understand that every embrace may be the last, we hold tighter, speak kinder, and appreciate more fully. To ignore death makes us careless. To accept death makes us grateful. Think of a grandparent watching their grandchild play. If they believe time is endless, they may glance at their phone, half distracted, assuming there will be many more afternoons like this. But if they remember that life is fragile and uncertain, then every giggle, every hug, every shared moment becomes priceless. This is not morbid, it is awakening. The thought of death reminds us to live with both urgency and tenderness. Modern society hides death. We keep it behind hospital walls, funeral homes, and polite silence. We treat it as failure, as something shameful, but the Stoics would tell us this is a mistake. To deny death is to deny life. By refusing to face the end, we fail to truly live in the middle. The ancients practiced memento mori, remember you must die. Far from depressing, this reminder was meant to inspire. It whispers, do not waste time. Do not put off kindness. Do not wait for tomorrow. Live today. Seneca urged his students to practice for death daily. Rehearse death. He wrote, to say this after you have gone to sleep. I have lived and run the course which fortune gave. If God should give me a longer life, I shall accept it gladly, but if not, I shall depart gladly. In other words, every day lived well is a complete life. If tomorrow comes, we welcome it. If it does not, we have no regrets. Death also humbles us. No matter our wealth, fame, or power, the same fate awaits. Kings and beggars alike return to dust. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself of this constantly. Surrounded by luxury and power, he stripped life down to its essence. Alexander the Great and his mule driver both died. And the same thing happened to both. To remember death is to remember equality. It frees us from pride and envy. For in the end, all our titles vanish. What remains is only how we lived. For those in later years, the acceptance of death can bring peace. Many spend their final decades consumed by fear of the inevitable. But the Stoics invite us to shift perspective. Death is not to be feared. It is to be embraced as part of life's rhythm. Just as we did not fear the centuries before our birth, so too should we not fear the silence after. What matters is how we use the time between. Imagine death as a companion, walking quietly beside you. If you pretend he is not there, you may waste your days in denial. But if you acknowledge his presence, you begin to live differently. You say what must be said. You forgive. You let go of grudges. You choose gratitude over complaint. Death's presence makes life urgent and beautiful. In practice, how do we learn this acceptance? The Stoics suggested meditation. Each day, pause and remind yourself, I may not see tomorrow. Then ask, if this were my last day, how would I live it? What would I value? What would I let go of? This practice does not darken life, it brightens it. It strips away the trivial and reveals what is essential. We can also observe nature. Every season teaches us impermanence. Blossoms fall, rivers change, stars fade. Nothing resists this cycle, and yet the universe is not diminished by it. We, too, are part of this pattern. To accept death is to accept our place in the whole. The Stoics remind us, death is not the end of meaning. Meaning is found in how we live before it. A short life lived with virtue is richer than a long life wasted in distraction. As Seneca wrote, life is long if you know how to use it. The measure of life is not years, but depth, and death, when accepted, urges us to add depth to every passing day. For the modern mind, surrounded by distractions, perhaps the greatest gift of this Stoic lesson is focus. If we remember we may die tomorrow, then we waste less time today. We stop arguing over petty things. We stop waiting to say, I love you. We stop deferring joy for some distant future that may never come. Death reminds us to live without delay. And when the final day does arrive, as it must, the Stoics teach us to meet it with dignity, not clinging, not raging, but accepting. For if we have lived with presence, with gratitude, with virtue, then death is no thief. It takes nothing from us, because we have already lived fully. In fact, it gives us release, like the closing of a well-read book, complete and whole. So let us practice as the Stoics did. Let us not hide from death, but remember it daily. Let us allow its presence to sharpen our love, deepen our gratitude, and strengthen our courage. Let us live so that when death comes, it finds us ready, not because we long for it, but because we have lived so well that nothing is left undone. For to accept death is not to give up on life, it is to embrace it, fiercely and fully. It is to wake each morning and say, "Today, I live, today, I will act with justice, courage, wisdom, and moderation, and if tonight I die, let me go gladly, knowing I have not wasted the gift." Lesson 9: Discipline your desires. Among the most profound teachings of Stoicism is the idea that freedom is not found in indulging every craving, but in mastering them. To the Stoics, unchecked desires are chains that enslave the soul. People often imagine freedom as the ability to do whatever one pleases, to eat what they want, buy what they want, chase pleasures without restraint. But the Stoics flipped this idea upside down. True freedom, they said, comes not from satisfying every desire but from learning which desires deserve to be followed, and which must be restrained. Epictetus, born a slave, knew this truth intimately. He said, "Freedom is not achieved by satisfying desire, but by eliminating it." To him, the man who must always drink, eat, spend, or be entertained is not free at all. He is a servant, not to another person, but to his own cravings. But the man who can say no, who can endure a little hunger, who can walk past temptation, who can be content with less, this man is master of himself, and no one can enslave him. Think of how much of modern life is driven by unchecked desire. Advertising thrives on it, whispering constantly, "You need more. You deserve more. You're incomplete until you have this." We live in a culture that celebrates indulgence, yet so many feel empty. Why? Because desires, like fire, grow stronger the more they are fed. The Stoics warned of this centuries ago. Seneca observed, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." Disciplining desire does not mean rejecting joy. The Stoics were not ascetics who sought to punish themselves. They enjoyed friendship, good food, meaningful work. What they rejected was slavery to pleasure. To enjoy something without needing it, that is freedom. To take delight in wine, but not crave it daily. To appreciate wealth, but not be destroyed if it is lost. To love deeply, but not collapse when fate takes it away. This balance is what they sought. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly of the dangers of excess. As emperor, he had access to every luxury the ancient world could offer. Yet in his Meditations, he wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Your soul takes on the color of your thoughts. If your thoughts are always on food, wealth, status, or pleasure, then your soul grows restless, shallow, and unsatisfied. But if your thoughts are on virtue, justice, wisdom, and gratitude, your soul grows calm and strong." Consider how desires pull us in everyday life. A man sees a new car and suddenly feels his old one is inadequate. A woman sees her neighbor's house and suddenly feels her own is too small. A retiree sees others traveling and suddenly feels his quiet life is dull. These desires arise not from real need, but from comparison and craving. The Stoics warn us, if you are always measuring life by what others have, you will never know peace. The discipline of desire means asking, do I truly need this? Or is this just restlessness disguised as need? Epictetus gave practical advice. He told his students, when you are tempted by pleasure, pause and imagine the cost. A sweet food may bring a moment of delight, but will it bring regret later? A cruel word may satisfy your anger for a second, but will it destroy peace for years? The wise man weighs desires not by how they feel in the moment, but by their long-term impact on the soul. For those in later years, this lesson resonates deeply. Many desires fade with time: youthful ambition, the hunger for status, the restless chase for wealth. And yet, other desires remain strong: the desire for comfort, for control, for endless security. The Stoics remind us that even these must be disciplined. To age with grace is not to cling desperately to every comfort, but to release them when needed. The more lightly we hold our desires, the less we suffer when time strips them away. Seneca suggested practicing restraint regularly, even when abundance is available. He wrote, "Set aside certain days on which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself, 'Is this what I feared?'" This exercise was not about misery, it was about strength. By practicing with little, we remind ourselves that we can endure little. By enjoying simple food, we remind ourselves that luxury is not necessary. In this way, we train the soul to remain calm no matter what fortune brings. Think of desire like a wild horse. Untrained, it runs wherever it wishes, pulling its rider into danger. But disciplined, it becomes a source of strength, speed, and freedom. The Stoics were not asking us to kill desire, but to train it, to direct it toward virtue, not vice, toward wisdom, not waste, toward gratitude, not greed. Let us consider modern examples. Many today are trapped in addictions: to alcohol, to screens, to shopping, to gossip. Each addiction begins with a small desire unchecked. One drink too many, one purchase too many, one indulgence that grows into habit. Before long, the desire no longer serves you, you serve it. Discipline is the way back, not by sudden perfection, but by daily practice of saying no, of choosing less, of reminding yourself that you are more than your cravings. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Part of that power is the ability to govern desires. When hunger says, "More," you can answer, "Enough." When pride says, "Prove yourself," you can answer, "I need no one's approval." When greed says, "Acquire more," you can answer, "I already have enough." Each act of discipline strengthens freedom, just as each act of indulgence weakens it. For older audiences, this lesson is liberating. To discipline desires is to unburden the soul. Instead of longing for what you no longer have, you learn to appreciate what you still do. Instead of clinging to youth, you embrace the wisdom of age. Instead of fearing decline, you find joy in simplicity. Discipline frees you from chains, chains not imposed by others, but forged by your own longings. The Stoics often pointed to nature as a teacher. Nature desires only what it needs. A tree does not hoard water, it drinks what is given. A bird does not build 10 nests, it builds one. Only humans, blinded by desire, crave endlessly beyond necessity. To live according to nature is to discipline desire, to return to sufficiency, and in sufficiency, there is peace. So how do we practice this discipline today? Begin by observing your cravings. When you feel the urge for more food, more possessions, more recognition, pause. Ask, will this truly add to my life? Or will it only increase my chains? Then, practice going without. Skip a luxury, decline an indulgence, say no to a desire just once. Notice how you survive, how you are still whole. Each time you resist, you weaken the hold of desire and strengthen your freedom. In the end, disciplining desire is not about deprivation. It is about empowerment. It is about choosing to be the master of your soul, not its servant. The Stoics remind us, the man who rules himself is greater than the man who rules the world. So let us learn this lesson well. Let us free ourselves from slavery to cravings. Let us practice contentment, gratitude, and restraint. Let us enjoy what we have without clinging, and let us release what we lose without despair. For the one who disciplines his desires is unshakable, unbreakable, and free. Lesson 10: Gratitude turns what we have into enough. Among the greatest treasures of Stoic philosophy is the practice of gratitude. While the world tells us to chase more, to measure life by possessions, success, or status, the Stoics remind us that happiness is not found in accumulation but in appreciation. Gratitude transforms the ordinary into extraordinary, scarcity into abundance, and what we already have into more than enough. Marcus Aurelius, writing to himself in his Meditations, often began with thanks. He expressed gratitude for his teachers, for the lessons of hardship, for the gift of being alive another day. Imagine an emperor who possessed the wealth and power of Rome, reminding himself daily to be thankful for simple things. Why? Because he knew the truth: without gratitude, even riches feel empty; with gratitude, even little feels full. Seneca, too, praised gratitude as a mark of wisdom. He wrote, "Nothing is more honorable than a grateful heart." For him, gratitude was not just politeness, it was strength. To see blessings where others see burdens, to find reasons for thanks even in hardship, is to live above circumstance. Life will always offer reasons to complain, but the Stoics chose to search for reasons to give thanks. In doing so, they discovered resilience. Epictetus, who began life as a slave, practiced gratitude daily. He said, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." He did not wait for wealth or comfort to feel rich. He found wealth in the ability to reason, to choose, to live in harmony with nature. For him, gratitude was not dependent on possessions, but on perspective. Gratitude shifts the focus of our minds. Without it, we live in constant comparison, always measuring ourselves against others. We see what we lack, not what we have. We dwell on absence instead of presence. This is why so many, even in wealthy societies, feel poor, but gratitude flips the lens. It teaches us to look at what is already ours and see it as abundance. The cup may not be full, but it is not empty, and if we can drink from it with thanks, it becomes enough. Consider the simple blessings often overlooked: the ability to walk, to breathe without pain, to share a meal, to see the sun rise. For many, these are taken for granted until they are gone. The Stoics practiced gratitude precisely to avoid this blindness. By imagining loss, what Stoics called negative visualization, they awakened appreciation for what remained. Seneca advised his students, expect everything, so that nothing comes as a surprise. When you imagine losing health, you cherish it more while you have it. When you imagine losing a loved one, you hold them closer while they are still here. Gratitude flows naturally when we remember life's fragility. Gratitude is also a remedy for fear. Much of our anxiety comes from imagining what we lack or may lose. But if we cultivate gratitude, we anchor ourselves in sufficiency. We no longer tremble at the thought of losing wealth, because we are already thankful for simpler joys. We no longer despair when comforts fade, because our joy was never tied only to them. Gratitude trains us to see value in every season of life. For those in later years, gratitude becomes a powerful companion. Youth may fade, strength may decline, loved ones may pass on, but gratitude remains. It allows us to look back not with bitterness for what is lost, but with thankfulness for what was given. Each wrinkle, each memory, becomes a reminder of a life lived and blessings received. Gratitude turns aging from loss into harvest. Modern science confirms what the Stoics knew. Studies show that gratitude lowers stress, improves health, strengthens relationships, and even extends life. But the Stoics did not need research to see this. They knew it in their own lives. Gratitude calms the restless mind. It shifts the heart from never enough to always enough. It teaches us that joy does not come from what happens outside, but from what we choose to see inside. Practicing gratitude can be simple, yet profound. Each morning, pause and name 3 things you are thankful for. They need not be grand: a quiet moment, a kind word, a warm meal. Each evening, reflect on the day and note its blessings. Even in hardship, search for one gift: a lesson learned, a friend's support, a moment of peace. Over time, This habit reshapes the mind, carving new paths of appreciation until gratitude becomes second nature. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that every day alive is a gift. He wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." This practice does not deny hardship, but it places it in perspective. Even in difficulty, life itself is enough reason for thanks. Let us imagine two people waking to the same rainy morning. One curses the weather, grumbles through the day, and feels cheated. The other smiles, thankful for the water that nourishes the earth, for the chance to rest indoors, for the reminder that not all days are sunshine. Which one lives better? Gratitude does not change the weather, but it changes the soul. The Stoics knew gratitude also strengthens relationships. To be grateful for others is to honor them, to see their worth, to cherish their presence. Too often, we only notice what people do wrong. Gratitude teaches us to notice what they do right. A spouse's small kindness, a friend's listening ear, a stranger's courtesy, these are threads of goodness woven through our days. To see them, and to give thanks, deepens connection and spreads peace. Epictetus would say that gratitude is the natural state of a free mind. For when you no longer demand that life give you more, you are finally free to enjoy what life already gives. Gratitude is not passive. It is active resistance against greed, envy, and fear. It is strength disguised as humility. In the end, gratitude is the capstone of Stoic wisdom. To control what you can, to see obstacles as opportunities, to live simply, to accept death. All of these led naturally to gratitude. For when you have trained your soul to need little, to expect change, to value virtue, you discover joy not in having more, but in being grateful for enough. So let us live this lesson. Each day, let us give thanks, for breath, for love, for lessons, for life itself. Let us resist the endless hunger for more and discover abundance in the present. Let us teach our children and grandchildren that gratitude is not weakness but strength. Not naivety but wisdom, for the grateful heart carries peace wherever it goes. And when the end of life approaches, gratitude is the companion that softens fear. Instead of lamenting what is gone, we give thanks for what was given. Instead of clinging desperately to more time, we rest peacefully in the time we had. Gratitude allows us to close the book of life not with regret, but with grace. The Stoics remind us, riches are not measured by wealth, but by gratitude. Freedom is not found in excess, but in sufficiency. Happiness is not hidden in distant futures, but here, now, in thankful hearts. Gratitude turns what we have into enough. And so, these are 10 timeless lessons from Stoicism, wisdom that has guided humanity for centuries, and can bring calm and strength to your life today. If even one of these lessons inspired you, carry it with you and practice it daily. True change comes from small, consistent actions. And if you'd like to continue exploring Stoic wisdom with us, make sure to subscribe to Stoic Quotes Life. Give this video a like, and share it with someone who might need it. Together, let's build a community of resilience, peace, and inner strength.